Every summer, homeowners across the Gulf Coast pay a company to send a truck down their street every 3 weeks, all season, to spray their yard for mosquitoes. Walt has not called one of those trucks in 34 years. The apartment building he has kept in Houston sees fewer bites in July than yards paying $600 a season for it. He never explained why until he opened a tin that once held pipe tobacco and showed me what has been sitting in his utility closet since 1994. It might seem strange to skip the seasonal barrier spray. The obvious answer is a professional mosquito service, the kind that sends a technician to coat your shrubs and fence line every 3 weeks from spring through fall. The companies are honest about what's in the tank. A synthetic pyrethroid, built to copy a molecule chrysanthemum flowers have made for 2,000 years, engineered to survive longer in sunlight than the natural version does. That's the first gap. It's a copy of a compound that already existed, altered to require a technician instead of a customer. The second gap is where it lands. Barrier spray coats foliage and shaded resting spots, killing the adult mosquitoes it touches that day and nothing that hatches after the truck leaves. The third gap is the business model itself. A treatment engineered to fade in 3 weeks is not an accident when the invoice arrives every 3 weeks too. Walt put it plainly. They're not selling you dead mosquitoes. They're selling you a schedule. He'd rather spend an afternoon in April than wait on a truck all summer. After 34 years watching the same courtyard, he has never once needed to. Every hardware store sells the same advice: a jug of yard spray or a subscription to the truck. Both work the way barrier spray works, since most are pyrethroids too. The actual mechanism is narrower. A pyrethroid disables the sodium channels in an insect's nervous system on contact and has no effect on anything it never touches, including water. That's the hidden problem no label mentions. A mosquito spends 3 of its 4 life stages, egg, larva, pupa, entirely submerged. The CDC puts the egg to adult window at 7 to 14 days, and researchers estimate removing standing water alone can cut a local population by as much as 70%. A few tablespoons in a paint can lid is enough. The mosquito needs no pond. Spray the yard every 3 weeks, and you're managing the 4th stage while the other 3 keep manufacturing replacements nearby. Walt found this behind his own dumpster enclosure, 2 inches of standing water after every storm, perfect for a raft of 200 eggs. Supers who stay decades catch this because they walk the grounds daily, not quarterly. In New Orleans, a courtyard building near the quarter has had the same super since 1988, carrying a 6-point checklist of where water pools after rain walked weekly. The spray handles what's flying today, he told me. It does nothing about what's swimming right now, getting ready to fly next week. That's the precise limit of everything sold as a season-long fix, a 4-day window inside a 14-day cycle, with the other 10 days somebody else's problem. That is where the first method changes the entire equation. The first method is called the dusk line. It's not a spray. It's 1% pyrethrin dust, ground from dried chrysanthemum flowers, the same plant family behind synthetic barrier sprays, sold at farm and garden suppliers in 10-ounce containers with a hand duster for around $14. A single perimeter pass uses about half an ounce, roughly $1, and 1 container lasts most of a season. Pyrethrin disables the same sodium channels the synthetic version does, except it breaks down within hours of sunlight instead of weeks. That isn't a flaw here, it's the reason for the name. Apply it at dusk when mosquitoes leave daytime resting spots to feed, dusting a thin line along the foundation, under stair landings, behind downspouts, and the undersides of dense shrubs, the exact places a mosquito rests during daylight. The common mistake is dusting at noon, when direct sun degrades the compound before evening feeding starts. Resting counts in dusted corners typically drop within a day. Walt, 71 now, reapplies his line every 10 to 14 days and has gone years without a resting cluster on his stairwells. "You're not spraying the yard," he said. "You're drawing a line the mosquito has to cross to reach a person." Pyrethrin saw its widest use before the Second World War, until wartime demand for delousing powder overwhelmed a supply chain running through the Pacific. Post-war manufacturers had little reason to promote a flower nobody could patent over a molecule they could. Breathing the dust is a real risk, Apply with the wind at your back and a basic mask, and keep pets, especially cats, out of the zone until it settles. It outperforms the bottled spray for one reason. It's placed exactly where the insect already rests, instead of broadcast across a yard hoping for contact. The dust line stops mosquitoes already outside. It does nothing about the ones already finding their way in. What's remarkable about this knowledge is how little of it made it into any manual. It moved building to building because someone showed someone else what worked. Documenting it here means it doesn't disappear. The second method is where most buildings actually leak mosquitoes. The second method is called the threshold seal. Every building has gaps a mosquito uses as a door. Torn screens, gaps under service entrances, attic vents with rusted mesh, and fixing them costs almost nothing. Fiberglass screen mesh runs about $4 for a 3-foot roll. Repair spline under $3. An intact 18 by 16 mesh screen physically blocks an adult mosquito. No chemistry required. Walk the exterior once at dusk with a flashlight held low. Torn screens throw a shadow easy to miss in daylight, but obvious once the sun drops, which is the mistake most people make, checking screens at noon when a 1/4-inch tear is nearly invisible. Patch what's torn, then dust the frame and threshold with the same pyrethroid from the first method, since a screen stops the mosquito but does nothing about the one already resting on the sill. A building with intact screens and a dusted threshold sees measurably fewer indoor complaints than one relying on spray alone. A retired maintenance supervisor who kept a school building in Tampa for 26 years put it plainly: nobody calls the exterminator for the mosquito that never got inside. He walked every screen twice a year, treated like checking smoke detectors, not optional. Screen replacement largely disappeared from routine maintenance once pest control shifted to a service model, since a technician selling monthly visits has no reason to hand over a $4 fix that ends the call. In older masonry buildings, weep holes at the base of brick veneer are an entry point almost nobody checks. The same mesh solves it. This method costs less than either of the first two and needs only twice yearly inspection. Every super interviewed for this video, across 4 cities, brought up the next step before being asked. The third method is called the water patrol, the one the recurring service model was never built to sell, because it can end the problem in a single afternoon. It costs nothing but time, plus roughly $8 for a 6-pack of BTI dunks for water that can't be removed. BTI, short for Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, is a naturally occurring soil bacterium toxic to mosquito larvae, harmless to fish, pets, and people, and approved for drinking water cisterns. Pyrethroid dust must never touch water directly. It's highly toxic to fish and aquatic insects. The method is a walking checklist: gutters, flower pot saucers, tarp folds, tire ruts, bird baths, a poorly draining AC condensate line. The CDC's own figure is that a capful of water is enough for a raft of eggs. The common mistake is treating this as a one-time spring chore instead of a weekly habit. Eggs above the waterline sit dry for months and hatch within hours of rain. A property that walks this checklist weekly needs far less of the first two methods. A super who has kept an apartment complex outside Phoenix for 19 years runs a shorter version suited to a dry climate, checking irrigation lines and pool covers instead of gutters. He told me, "People think the desert doesn't have mosquitoes. It has exactly as many as you give it water for." The post-war pest control industry built its pricing around the one life stage you can see, the one that justifies a truck. A larval count in a gutter has never been billable the way a flying adult is, so homeowner advice has spent decades emphasizing adulticide spray over source reduction. Counterintuitively, a heavily landscaped property with dense mulch and ornamental fountains often has a worse mosquito problem than a plainer one, since still fountains become larval nurseries with better curb appeal than a rain barrel. None of this is theory. It's a checklist taped inside a utility closet door in a building that hasn't had a resident mosquito complaint in longer than the current property manager has worked there. Experienced supers run all 3 methods as one system. The water patrol removes most of the supply. The dusk line handles what the patrol misses or drifts in from a neighbor's yard. The threshold seal stops what's left from reaching a person indoors. Skip one and it shows up as a slower version of the same problem the spray was supposed to solve. Building age changes the priority. In pre-war brick and masonry, weep holes and old cast iron cleanouts are the entry points worth checking first, while newer vinyl-sided buildings shift the risk toward window unit AC drainage and gutters that clog faster with less capacity. Climate reorders the priority again. Along the humid Gulf Coast, the Water Patrol runs weekly from March through November, and the dusk line needs reapplication roughly every 10 days. In a dry climate like Phoenix, the patrol matters more than the dust, since there's simply less ambient moisture creating resting sites away from managed water. Seasonally, the order is screens first in early spring, then the first dusk line pass about 2 weeks before local activity starts, with the Water Patrol running continuously beneath both once temperatures hold above the mid-50s. The most common expert modification is timing the dust to actual sunset rather than the clock, since day length shifts by more than 2 hours across a season. What comes next never made it into a single pest control training manual. Walt learned it from the man who had the job before him, in a building neither of them ever left. Late in our last conversation, he pulled a strip from the same tin that once held pipe tobacco. Burlap, soaked years ago in a stronger pyrethroid solution and dried in shade, tied along the courtyard fence and refreshed every spring since the 1990s. The idea came from his predecessor, who'd seen it used on livestock and adapted it for a building instead. Soaking cloth in the solution and drying it away from direct sun does what loose dust cannot. The fibers hold the compound in shaded pockets, out of the ultraviolet light that breaks it down within hours, so a strip lasts weeks between refreshing instead of days. It doesn't replace the dusk line. It extends it into the gaps a storm washes the loose dust from. The reason it never spread is unremarkable. Burlap isn't a product anyone can label and sell, and a technique shown hand-to-hand only travels as far as the hands doing the showing. Walt said something before I left that afternoon I haven't stopped thinking about. He said, "A building will tell you exactly what it needs if you're willing to walk it instead of just servicing it." Before we finish, here's the complete materials breakdown for anyone taking notes. Method 1, the dusk line. 1% pyrethroid dust, about $14 for 10 ounces. Hand duster, $6. Total, $20, lasting most of a season. Method 2, the threshold seal. Fiberglass screen mesh, $4 a roll. Repair spline under $3. Total, under $7. Method 3, the Water Patrol. Free, plus an $8 six-pack of BTI dunks for the water you truly can't remove. The end secret modification, burlap strip, and a stronger pyrethroid solution, under $5, refreshed once a year. Complete system, under $40 to start, a few dollars a month through the season. 3 methods, 1 modification, and a building that stops needing the truck entirely. Keeping a property mosquito-free permanently comes down to the dusk line, the threshold seal, the Water Patrol, and if you want the coverage Walt's courtyard has had since the 1990s, the burlap refinement layered on top. None of these require a technician or a seasonal contract. Everyone was ordinary building knowledge before pest control became something you subscribed to instead of something you did. Walt put the philosophy into one line before I packed up my camera. A building will tell you what it needs if you're willing to walk it. What he kept in a tobacco tin for 3 decades was never a secret. It just never got offered to the people paying $600 a summer to avoid learning it themselves. How much have you spent on mosquito treatments this year? Drop the number in the comments. I want to see what this summer has actually cost people. If this saved you from writing a check to a truck this season, subscribing means the next building secret reaches someone else stuck doing the same thing. If it changed how you look at your own fence line, hitting like puts it in front of the next person paying for a schedule instead of a fix. The video on screen right now covers a different building problem old school supers solved permanently for pennies. Go watch that one next. Someone on your street is renewing a mosquito contract this week without knowing a $14 tin of dust exists. Hyping this video is how it reaches them before the invoice does.